You are aware of the adage regarding basketball. Being a sport that requires teamwork? Well, no one can prove it's superior to 3 Indiana Fever guards who just demonstrated to the world what true friendship looks like. However, before we plunge into this roller coaster of emotions, don't forget to hit the subscribe button because to the subsequent events between Lexie Hull, Sophie Cunningham, and Caitlin Clark is going to explode up. Your thoughts? Imagine this. July 17th, 2025. The purpose of the WNBA All-Star Weekend is to begin in Indianapolis. Fans of Fever have been keeping track of the days. Within minutes, all of the tickets were sold out. The city is a flurry of enthusiasm. Everybody's eager to visit the hero of their hometown, light up the three-point, Caitlin Clark, compete and serve as team captain, Clark. In the game of All-Stars, the stage is ideal conditions for what ought to be the largest celebration of Clark's amazing sophomore campaign. Then suddenly, in a flash, everything is different. Simply, a few days after winning the WNBA Player of the Caitlin Clark drops the year at the SBS. Terrible news that causes a tremor via the world of basketball. The 23-year-old celebrity declares she's withdrawing from the All-Star Weekend entirely. No contest with 3 points, no. Not an All-Star game. The damage to the groin. She reacted negatively to Connecticut's had her make the most difficult choice of her profession. However, this is where the plot takes a turn that no one anticipated, because the subsequent events weren't about All-Star or basketball statistics. Looks. It had to do with something stronger, something that would expose the actual nature of the Indiana. Show why these 3 players have a fever, have evolved beyond being colleagues. They're now kin. Let's go back in time for a moment to realize how heartbreaking this was. The time. Never before had Caitlin Clark missed one of her basketball games. Career prior to this season. Not very high. Not at Iowa, not while she was in school. Record-breaking first season. She was the Iron Woman of basketball. Next, 2025. Strikes, and all of a sudden she's coping with one injury after another. First, a quad problem. Then a left groin during the preseason. Issue that keeps her away for 5 games. As soon as she returns and loses to the defense by 32 points. Liberty, the champion, demonstrating that she's still that her misfortune hits once more. The July 15th game in Connecticut should have been merely another Tuesday evening contest. Clark was acting a little too casually. Discomfort, but persevering. Next, in the last second, as she makes a straightforward bounce pass to Mitchell Kelsey, something goes wrong. It is visible on her face right away. The grimace that every athlete is all too familiar with, the "oh no, don't look" that makes your stomach turn again. Fall. Stephanie White, the head coach, attempted, in order to maintain optimism following the game, informing reporters that Clark would be assessed and they will soon have more information. However, everyone secretly feared the worst. And 48 hours later, those anxieties became into actuality. This girl ran an all-star fan club, who was meant to be the primary vote-getter, had to bow due to the attraction at her home venue. Out. I'm really depressed, and I regret that I am unable to take part when playing the three-point game or the all-star match. In a comment that immediately struck Fever enthusiasts in the fields, my body needs to rest. I remains at the Gamebridge Fieldhouse for everything going on, and I'm looking eager to assist Sandy Brondello as a coach. Our group to victory. You sense every syllable is filled with sadness. This wasn't merely skipping a match. This was absent. The match in front of her in her city. Admirers. Following a season in which she had already missed 10 games during the regular season, suffering with a range of wounds. For an individual as fiercely competitive like Clark, a person who lives and is passionate with basketball, so this had to seem like pain. However, keep in mind how I said that there was more to this story than basketball. This is where it gets incredibly fascinating. Since Clark is no longer in the WNBA required a three-point competition, replaced quickly. They were not required to look far. Now, let's talk about Clark's partner on the backcourt and among the most. The league's underappreciated shooters. The Hull had been secretly assembling a stellar year, achieving an absurd 49% out of three-point range. Not 459, not 40. Folks, those are video game numbers. Hull was the ideal substitute for Paper. She possessed the home and the shooting touch, crowd edge, as well as the competitive fire to honor Indiana. However, at the time, no one was aware that Hull had her own problems. Terrible loss. I'm not talking either. Regarding basketball, only 2 days before being selected as Clark's substitute, Lexie, Hull bid farewell to her closest companion of 14 years old, Maggie, her dog, who had been with her since she was 11 years old, died. If you've ever experienced pet loss, you are aware that this pain feels different. It's not merely losing a pet, it's losing a relative or someone who has been there through everything. Each victory, each setback, each solitary evening when it didn't go your way in basketball. The Hull shared the devastating information on Instagram posts featuring a number of black and photographs in white that would make even the toughest person breaks down. One of her in childhood, most likely in middle school age, cradling Maggie the infant. Another displays them by the water's absorption of sunlight. The final one, with Maggie wearing spectacles. The couch, appearing to be the most stylish canine in Indiana. 14 years with the most adorable Mags. According to Hull, home won't be the heaven got the best without you girl this week. Now picture yourself in Hull sneakers. You recently misplaced your childhood friend. Your heart is broken. You're attempting to comprehend this sorrow. Then all of a sudden you're asked to take center stage at All-Star Weekend, taking the place of the biggest celebrity in women's basketball. Discuss the emotional impact. Whiplash. But the magic happens here. Occurs. Here, we may observe what makes the special on the Indiana Fever, due to the fact that Lexie Hull's sorrow was hardly unique. Not even near. Minutes after Hull's post, her phone began to explode. However, we weren't merely saying, "I'm sorry for your loss" messages. Her sisters were making contact. Her family of basketball players, appearing when it was most important. Caitlin Clark was among those who first answer. Caitlin Clark, the same person who was coping with her personal letdown, her personal annoyance at missing the All-Star the weekend. She might have been moping in her own issues. Rather, she contacted Hull right away with a straightforward but impactful message. "I love you, dog heaven." Just 4 words. That's all. However, the briefest messages can occasionally convey the greatest weight. Clark had no intention of make everything right or utter the ideal thing. She was merely informing her teammate she wasn't by herself. That is true friendship. That's it. However, Clark wasn't alone. The third is Sophie Cunningham, a part of this amazing trio, and possibly the most fascinating tale of the 2025 season. Cunningham became a member of the off-season Fever following years spent in Phoenix. Initially, some individuals questioned how she would blend in. Would she blend in with the youthful core? Could she accept a smaller role? Would there be problems with chemistry? Man, those worries appear foolish today. Due to Sophie Cunningham wasn't merely a member of the Fever, she turned into the lifeblood of the group, the guardian, the enforcer. the person who actually threw hands.
If her teammates were tampered with.
When Cunningham came across Hall's remark regarding Maggie's reaction was prompt and uncooked. "I'm sorry, Lex. You sensed the feeling via the display. This wasn't a teammate providing a required my sympathies. This acquaintance of mine whose another friend's heart was hurting. All of this is made possible by the timing of very strong. Consider it the WNBA. The league's largest event is All-Star Weekend.
Display.
Players train for weeks. Deals for endorsements are struck during this time, when there is a peak in national attention, when careers can flourish. For Hull, being those selected for the three-point competition should have been nothing but joy.
An opportunity to
perform in front of the audience at home. Evidence that she is a member of the league's top shooters. Rather, she's grieving while attempting to get ready for the most significant event of her career. Most folks aren't able to lift that weight.
Consider carrying.
However, she wasn't carrying it by itself. Look, there's something unique about the relationship between Hull and Clark Cunningham. Supporters began referring to them as Trace Leches following the renowned dessert. It began as a joke when Cunningham shared twins about her on social media, and Hull appeared alike, but it turned into something more substantial, something tangible. These three stands for everything positive about team sports, various origins, distinct jobs, distinct approaches, but bonded by a more profound connection than basketball. Clark is the star, the franchise's spokesperson, the person who fills venues and sets records. Hull is the sharpshooter, the stealthy killer who performs her duties without looking for attention. Cunningham is the veteran and the enforcer, who has witnessed everything and won't let anyone to
punk her teammates.
On paper, they shouldn't collaborate thus effectively. However, you do realize that basketball isn't played on paper? The relationship between the Trace Leches became so famous enough that Cunningham wore a shirt for a cartoon-themed game. Variations of each of the three. I'm not fabricating this. She actually walked into the arena while sporting her colleagues' outfits. Her chest. When reporters inquired about, she simply grinned and said, "Family." That's all. One word that clarified everything. However, let's discuss what created this occasion during All-Star Week in order to important, as it wasn't solely focused. Three pals helping one another out.
It
was about changing the definition of success. Similar to professional sports, we reside in a world where everything is measured in statistics, shooting, and points per game. Numbers, successes and failures, and societal media followers, money for endorsements, all-star shows. However, what Clark? We learned from Holland Cunningham that something more significant than everything, anything that isn't possible, quantified or monitored using a spreadsheet. They demonstrated humanity to us. Pause and consider Caitlin Clark. This individual carried the burden of the whole league on her back from day one. You must watch every game she plays. Television. She analyzes every shot she makes. Every error is enlarged. The strain. Most people would be crushed. However, in her darkest basketball incident, in which she all the freedom to be self-centered and concentrate on, to her own dismay, she promptly considered the suffering of her comrades.
That's
leadership.
True leadership.
Not the type that is taught in a textbook or a inspirational